Hello and welcome. The title of the message today is Self-Love with lowercase s and l versus self-love where the s and the l are capitalized. But let's begin by affirming together our opening statement. There is only one presence and one power in my life and the universe. God. I invite you now to take a deep breath with me, just breathing in and relaxing and releasing, allowing your awareness to be in this present time, in the present space, right where your feet are, right now. And in this moment, we open ourselves to Spirit, the teacher within us, asking that we will properly digest the ideas that are shared today. And so it is. Amen. So there's this idea of self-love where self is small letter and self with a capital letter. You've heard me refer to these in Aramaic as the nafsha, self, versus the ruha. So I'll use those two words so I don't have to keep referring to these capital letters and lowercase letters. And let's begin with a statement that Jesus makes in the Gospel according to John in chapter 15. And I'd like to read for you one verse, verse 13, from the George Lamsa translation from the Aramaic words that Jesus spoke. There is no greater love than this, that a man lay down his life for the sake of his friends. This is a verse that when I was in the army, I often brought to mind. But there's a different way of looking at it. Looking at this verse as guidance for our inner growth, guidance for our spiritual growth, I see something quite different than what I saw as a soldier. There is no greater love. So we're talking about this ruah, self. No greater love than to lay down this life. We're not talking about a death of the body here. We're talking about giving up this nafsha, this separate self sense of love. And what do we mean here when we say this nafsha sense of self-love? And we all have it. It's something that we have in varying degrees, and from moment to moment, the degree that we are experiencing it will vary. Okay, so I'd like you to ask a few questions of yourself. Remember, these are general questions, so your specific questions will be similar, but maybe not exactly all of these. What kinds of love have you observed in yourself? And are they all the same? Maybe you love food, or you love a feeling of comfort. Maybe you love your possessions, your children. Maybe you love being praised. Maybe you love money. Maybe you love power. You love going to the theater. You love watching videos on your television. You love to get dressed up. Or perhaps you love smoking. You love to hear the scandalous gossip what's going on with the stars. Or you love getting the better of somebody else. In other words, putting them down to make me feel more raised. Or you love just the simple process of scheming. Or you love your dog, or your bird, or your cat, or your horse. Maybe you love success. Or you love chocolate. You love, well, what is it that you love? All of these loves are pointing at something. They're like the spokes on a wheel that point to the center. And that is what we're talking about when we say this nafsha love, this love with a lowercase l, this self-love with a small s. Remember when we talked about selfies and spiritual growth? How the only thing that can follow I am is I am? That if I am something, I am in a picture. These ideas here, these questions, are evolving around some picture that's at the center. And there might be more than one. And here's what's really odd. When our pictures are challenged, when we begin to challenge this idea of self-love, of the nafsha self, we get upset. We get depressed. We get angry. So, we look at ourselves. We ask these questions. There's no greater love than this, that we lay down this self-love, this nafsha love, for the sake of our friends. And our friends are those parts of us that aren't part of this self-love, but that are leading us to ruah, to this alignment, this realization of our true self. Ruah, spirit. I'd like to share with you some things that have been going on in my life as an example of this. I like to go up to the Dream Maker and have my aura read. They've got a machine, you lay your hand down, and it takes a picture, and it shows colors. And, I was kind of a doubter at first, and I'm not sure it's all there, but it's really interesting to see the results. And I've been doing it basically once every year for several years, so I've gotten to see how it changes. And this year, when I went back in April, I got a really beautiful picture. All of these blues and whites with a little bit of green around my solar plexus, and I was just really and balance between masculine and feminine here. So this was just off the charts. This blue that was radiating so far with such power in all of the higher chakra areas. Well, that self-love in me, that nafsha sense of self-love, grabbed a hold of this, and give me the credit. Made me feel really good about myself, this separate self. And so we have this picture that I'm beginning to call Billy. This personality that likes being a minister and really just likes all the outer things that go with it. This, I believe, opened me up. It made me weak to another self that is in there that I've noticed before, but it came around in a very strong way and it snuck in there so that I didn't see it as it came. I've been struggling with this phenomena, this relative thing that the doctors call type 2 diabetes. And I hadn't been doing really well with it. And I started reading this book called An Inflammation Nation. I highly recommend it. That title is An Inflammation Nation. But as I read this book, and I started feeling this overwhelming sense that no matter what I do, I've still got this sugar level that I take when I stick my finger that's way higher than it needs to be. And I start reading this book and I start seeing why, and I'm starting to get really upset. So this, what I like to call James Dean in me, this rebel without a cause, is just really getting pissed. Because what I'm seeing is this book has given me food to blame it all on corporate farms that are controlling our government and all of these things. And I can take a deep breath, though, and realize I control what I put in my body. I control what my body does. But I was in the middle, caught up in this self-love, you see, that denies that I could possibly be doing this to me, and that it had to be that I'm a victim. So as I was researching for this message today, that's when it really occurred to me. You've been in this middle, caught up in this pattern of error thought. And these things are going on. And so, there's some more questions. Once you realize what are these loves, this love of pizza, this love of ice cream, this love of this feeling of the rebellion itself, the feeling of anger at something outside of myself. Why am I doing this? What a useful question. Where is this coming from? And that's, in the welcoming practice, I give these funny names to these little characters, like the new one that I've discovered, that Billy, and this one that's been around for a long, long time, the James Dean. Why am I saying these things? Why am I doing these things? Why am I behaving this way? Why was I eating this ice cream and this pizza and just not even, and chips, and just not even, just totally giving up all hope of controlling this sugar, and I'm watching it climb every day? Why? Well, look at this pattern of error thought. Look at what's going on. This self-love that's not helpful. So, Jesus is telling us here in verse 13 that we can lay these down. Why? For the sake of our friends. For the sake of those parts of us that are helping us to grow. The ones that influence us to do things like watch this video, to go to church, to read books that are of a spiritual nature, that influence our thoughts in a certain direction, that change our way of thinking, our way of looking at the world. I've gone a little over today, but I hope this has been helpful. What are those things that you love? And what are they centered around? I'd like for you to pray with me our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. And thank you.